My name doesn't matter. Same as last time. What matters is what happened 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning that started like every other Tuesday morning in this town, until it very suddenly didn't. At around 9 a.m., without warning, without any shared announcement, every single adult in this town, all at once, remembered the same crime. Not a crime any of us had witnessed. Not a crime that had ever been reported, investigated, or even whispered about before that morning. A crime none of us had any memory of until we all, simultaneously, remembered it together, in perfect, matching detail. This is what I've pieced together since then, and I need to get it down before the town finishes convincing itself, again, that none of this is as strange as we all know it is. The morning it started, I was making coffee. That's the mundane, almost embarrassing detail I keep coming back to, because whatever happened while I was standing at my kitchen counter doing absolutely nothing unusual. One moment I was pouring water into the machine, the next I was gripping the counter, because a memory had just arrived in my head, fully formed, vivid and undeniable, of something I knew, with complete certainty, I had never actually witnessed. The memory was this: a man named Walter Prescott, who ran the old hardware store on Elm before it closed 11 years ago, had killed his business partner in the store's back room, sometime in the spring, and buried him beneath the store's foundation before it was demolished and turned into what's now a parking lot for the pharmacy next door. I didn't remember hearing about this. I remembered it happening. I remembered details no outside story would include, the specific tool involved, the time of day, even the weather that afternoon, overcast with a threat of rain that never came. It felt exactly like remembering something I'd lived through, except I hadn't. Walter Prescott was a real man. The hardware store was real, but I had never once, in my entire life, heard so much as a rumor about a murder connected to either of them. By the time I got my phone out, hands shaking more than I wanted to admit, I already had 11 messages waiting. Realizing it wasn't just me. The messages were all some version of the same thing, people asking, carefully, almost embarrassed, if anyone else was suddenly thinking about the Prescott thing, not asking what it was, asking if others remembered it too, the way you'd check if someone else saw the same flash of lightning you did, already suspecting the answer, but needing to hear it confirmed before trusting your own eyes. By noon, it was clear this wasn't isolated. Every adult in town, every single one I managed to speak with or hear from secondhand, over 400 people by the most conservative estimate, had experienced the exact same thing at almost the exact same time that morning. Different circumstances, different locations, some driving, some sleeping in late. One man told me he'd been in the middle of a work call and had to abruptly excuse himself when the memory hit. But the content was identical. Walter Prescott. The hardware store. The murder. The burial beneath what's now a parking lot. Notably, and this detail matters more than it seemed to at first, every single person over the age of roughly 40 had the memory. Every person younger than that, teenagers, young adults in their 20s and early 30s, had absolutely nothing. No memory, no reaction, nothing but confused, slightly alarmed reactions to watching their parents, aunts, uncles, and older neighbors all describe an identical murder none of them could recall ever learning about, discussing it with a certainty that unsettled the younger residents far more than any actual crime would have. What we found when we checked. Here's where it stopped being explainable as some kind of shared hallucination or mass hysteria, however unlikely that already sounded. A small group of us, 5 people who'd known each other for years, decided to actually go check the parking lot behind the pharmacy. Not because we expected to find anything. I think, honestly, most of us went expecting to feel foolish standing in an empty parking lot, waiting for a memory that couldn't possibly be real to embarrass itself by being wrong. We contacted the property owner, and after some resistance, convinced him to allow a small excavation near the section of the lot that matched what several of us, independently and without comparing notes beforehand, had identified as the specific location. I want to be clear that 5 separate people, without discussing it with each other first, walked to within about 10 feet of the exact same spot. 3 days later, with the property owner's reluctant permission and a private contractor rather than police, given how insane the whole premise sounded on paper, they found remains. Human remains, consistent with having been buried for approximately the length of time our shared memory indicated, in the exact location our shared memory had described, beneath what used to be the hardware store's back room. The remains have since been sent for identification, and as of 3 days ago, when I'm writing this, results haven't been publicly released. But the physical fact of remains actually being present, exactly where 400 people who shouldn't have known anything all somehow knew to look, is not something anyone in this town can rationalize away anymore. What the town's older residents won't say. Here's the detail that's kept me from sleeping properly since this started. I went around, carefully, quietly, asking some of the older residents, people in their 60s, 70s, even a few in their 80s, whether this had ever happened before. Not this specific crime, this specific phenomenon. A memory, shared collectively, arriving all at once, describing something none of them had actually lived through. Most people looked at me like I was asking something absurd, but 3 separate people, all over 70, all giving me nearly identical hesitant answers, told me some version of the same thing. This had happened once before, decades ago, when they themselves were young, describing a different shared memory, a different unremembered event that had also, eventually, turned out to be real when someone finally checked. None of the 3 would tell me what the earlier memory was about. 2 of them changed the subject entirely, visibly uncomfortable, in a way that felt less like forgetting and more like actively not wanting to remember. The third, an elderly woman named Eleanor who's lived here her entire life, told me only this, that whatever this town is doing, it isn't remembering crimes at all. It's confessing them, decades late, to whoever happens to be standing in the town at the moment it decides to speak. She wouldn't clarify what she meant by the town doing anything. When I pushed, she simply said I'd understand eventually, the same way she had, and asked me not to bring it up with her again. The detail that doesn't add up. I went back to my own file, the same kind of tracking I'd built during the disappearances, and I started mapping out exactly who received the memory and who didn't. The age cutoff wasn't clean. Not everyone over 40 had it. Not everyone under 40 lacked it. But it correlated almost perfectly with one specific thing: how long each person had lived within the town's limits. Every single person who received the memory had lived in this town continuously for at least 18 years. Every person who didn't receive it, regardless of age, had either moved here more recently or had left and returned within that window. One woman in her 50s, who moved away for exactly 19 years before returning 6 years ago, 25 years total but with that gap in the middle, did not receive the memory. A man in his early 30s, who has lived here his entire life without ever leaving, did receive it, despite being younger than most others who did. It isn't age, it's unbroken residency. 18 consecutive years, minimum, and something about you becomes eligible to receive whatever this is, this transferred confession, this delayed collective remembering, regardless of how old you actually are. I don't know what that threshold means yet. But it means this isn't random, and it isn't purely biological or generational the way it first appeared. It's tied to the town itself, to time spent inside its boundaries specifically, as if something has been quietly counting how long each of us has stayed, waiting for a number to be reached before deciding we've earned, or been assigned, a piece of its memory. What happens now? The town, predictably, is trying to move past this as quickly and quietly as possible. There's been no official statement beyond a brief mention of historical remains discovered during a private excavation, carefully avoiding any reference to the shared memory that led us there in the first place. Officially, as far as any public record will ever show, a group of curious residents simply got lucky with an old rumor. But privately, in group chats, in hushed conversations at the diner, the same question keeps circling without ever quite being asked directly. If this has happened before, decades ago, to a different older generation, and it's happening again now. Then it's not a one-time event. It's a cycle. Which means somewhere, right now, there's likely another buried, unremembered crime waiting its turn, sitting quietly beneath some other unremarkable patch of this town, waiting for enough of us to reach that same 18-year threshold, waiting for its own morning to arrive. Eleanor's words won't leave me alone, not remembering, confessing, as if the town itself has a memory separate from any of ours, holding on to things the people who did them never got to speak aloud, waiting until enough long-term witnesses accumulate to finally let it out, all at once, into as many heads as it can reach in a single morning. I don't know how many more of these confessions are still buried here, or how long any of us have left before the next one arrives. What I do know is that I've lived here for 16 years. 2 more, and according to whatever pattern is actually running underneath this town, I'll be eligible too. I'll be keeping the file open. If you've lived somewhere long enough to notice something that doesn't add up, a memory that surfaced too easily, a certainty about something you never actually witnessed, tell me. Because whatever this town is holding on to, it isn't finished speaking yet. Subscribe to Anime Echo Tales, because some stories don't end when you think they do. They just wait for the town to remember.